Adding a new original quilt design to QuiltSandwich is so easy. You can spend more time designing and dreaming up new quilts to make than spending time trying to figure out how much fabric you need to buy and worrying about math formulas so that your pieces come out the right size. To add a new design of your own making to QuiltSandwich, just tap the Quilts Create and Edit button. And you will see that there is an option to add a new quilt. Let's go ahead and do that. Now, you can add a new quilt, you can copy a quilt with fabrics, or copy a quilt without fabrics. There's a separate video on how to copy quilts using the Add a New Quilt button, but I'm going to focus right now on adding a new quilt. So let's tap that button. And you will see that I need to enter in 3 pieces of information: the quilt name, the quilt width, and the quilt length. The width and the length are my finished sizes, which I have determined from my drawings, which I'll show you in just a couple minutes here. Let's go ahead and enter in the quilt name. For the purposes of this video, I have decided to make a table topper just to give you an idea of how to easily add the information into QuiltSandwich. And my table topper is 24 inches wide. And I can enter that information in by just tapping in the data entry box. And my table topper is 24 inches long. And I can use the arrows to change my value, or I can use the slider. And you can see how the arrows increment or decrement accordingly. And so now I have my name and my dimensions, and I'm going to add a new image. Now I have some images that are already loaded to my iPad, and I'll show you how to add a new image here in just a second. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load a picture of what my table topper looks like. So I'm going to choose an image that I have loaded into the app. And there you can see the picture of my table topper as it's finished. And now I'm going to take a picture of my original block design that I drew up for this table topper. So all I'm going to do is tap Add New Image. And I'm going to select the image that says Snap a Picture. Here is a drawing of the block that I used for my picture. It asks me if I want to use the photo, and I do. And it says, do I want to save it to the photo library in the app? That switch is turned on. If I tap off, it won't save it to my app photo library, but I want to do that. So I'm going to tap on and I'm going to tap save. Now you can see that new image. The rest of the images that I want to show you are the drawings that I put together for my table topper to just give you a quick idea of how I went about designing my table topper so that numbers make sense to you. So the next picture that I'm going to bring in from my app library is how I labeled my pieces for this quilt design. So here you can see that I took my drawing of how my quilt looks, and now I labeled all of the pieces. So every shape and every size has a separate letter, and all I need to do is to count up the number of shapes that I need and make a notation of that. And I'll show you how I do that. So I'm going to bring in another image. And here you can see the notations that I made for the block and the number of pieces that I need for each piece of the block. So for piece A is 2 by 6. I need 1 in each block, and I'm making 4 blocks, so I need to make 4 of them. And I go through each piece A through J and make the notation of how many I need. And that's the information that I use in order to calculate the amount of yardage that I need. So I've got all my drawings saved. So I'm going to go ahead and save all this information. And now you'll see that I have table topper added to my quilts. Well, let's get started trying to figure out how much fabric we need. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to calculate the fabric yardage. So I'm going to tap table topper, and I come to this screen that lets me put in journal information, so you can start a journal with this particular project, or you can go right into adding a new piece. Let's go in and add a new piece. And I'm going to add a piece from the calculator. I can also add a piece from my fabric stash, or if I find fabric in the fabric store that I would like to purchase for a quilt that I'm making, I can at least capture a picture of the fabric and add all of the information later. So that way, when you get home, you're not wondering, what in the world did I buy this fabric for? What quilt was I going to use it in? Let's go ahead and add a piece from the calculator. So I'm going to add piece A from the calculator. So I'm going to type in my piece name, and I'm just going to call it piece A. Now, one thing to remember about the calculator is how you name your pieces is how your cutting diagrams are labeled. So you may want to give some thought as to how you go about naming your pieces, and that would possibly help you with block assembly. And my piece width is 2 inches. So I'm going to go in and change that to 2, and it is 6 inches long. And I need 4. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to use yardage, but I can also choose fat quarters as my size of fabric. And I'm going to have the yardage calculator use the least amount of fabric. There's a separate video that goes over all of the information for the yardage calculator, by all of the different pieces you can add and all of the different settings that you can change. So I'm not going to go into that in this video, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of what it is that you can change. And then you can see over on the right hand side that you have a cutting diagram that says that you need to cut 4 rectangles 2.5 by 6.5. Now think about that. We put in a size of 2 by 4 for our rectangles because that was our finished size. And the calculator went ahead and said, but you need to cut those 2.5 by 6.5, so it added all of the seam allowances. So with no math, you now know how many pieces you need to cut, you know what size you need to cut them, and you know how much yardage you need to purchase. And so I like the way this cutting diagram looks, so I'm going to save it. If you are working on your iPhone, you have access to the cutting diagram information as well. It just doesn't show side by side. You need to tap on the scissors button in order to view this information. Let's look at adding our half square triangles. So I'm going to add a new piece, and I'm going to add it from the calculator again, and I'm going to add piece G. And I'm going to select the half square triangle icon. And now what I need to tell it is what is the length of my finished half square triangle. In this particular project, my finished length is 2 inches. So I'm going to change my finished length to 2 inches. You can see the cutting diagram moving, and I need 4. And you'll see that I need 1/8 of a yard. If you look over at the cutting diagram, you can see that I need to cut my strip 2 7/8 by 2 7/8. Pretty slick. Now, if you wanted to cut your triangles oversized, for example, and then trim them down, which a lot of us do so that our points are more accurately matched, what I would suggest that you do is just change the finish size by 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch to bump it up the amount that you're comfortable with trimming off, so that you will still end up with the right size triangle based upon how you trim it down with your ruler. But I like the information that I see here, so I'm going to save it. And there I have piece G, and I need 1/8 of a yard. Let's take a look at the border, because I have a specific fabric in mind that I'm going to use for that. So I'm going to add a new piece, and I'm going to add a piece from fabrics. And I have this blue floral that I've already added to my stash. I've got 2 1/4 yards left, and it cost me $8 a yard to purchase this fabric. And I'm going to use that for my border, so I'm going to tap in the name of this piece. And I'm going to select my fabric, and you know that was done because you've got the pink check mark, and I'm going to tap Save. And now you'll see that I have my fabric selected. I know it's for my border, but let's set the piece size. Let's set the border information. So I'm going to select border. My borders are going to be put on my table topper using the second option, where the 2 vertical sides are going to be my longest pieces. So I'm going to tap that option, and I want my border finished width to be 4 inches. So I'm going to change that to 4. And the finished width of my top and the finished length of my top is 16 inches. So if you go back and look at my picture, I've got 4 8-inch blocks, 2 by 2, 8 plus 8 is 16, so I have a 16-inch square, so my top width is 16 inches wide and 16 inches long. I like to cut my borders on the crosswise grain, but if I wanted to cut them on the lengthwise grain because I don't mind piecing, all I have to do is tap that option. But I like how that's looking, and if I look over to the right, I know exactly how long to cut my strips. 2 of them are going to be cut 24.5 inches long, and 2 of them are going to be cut 16.5 inches long. That is like so cool that I just need to know what layout I want for my borders and what the dimensions are for my top, and I am able to quickly determine how much fabric I need and how to cut it. I like this information, so I'm going to save it. And there you have it. I was quickly able to add all of these pieces with absolutely no math in terms of how much fabric I need and how I go about cutting my pieces for my blocks. Have fun with the different features of adding a new quilt. You can spend most of your time designing, as I said before, rather than worrying about the math. And the designing and the sewing part is the fun part of quilting. If you have any questions about how to add a new quilt or about the QuiltSandwich app, please send us an email by going to our website, QuiltSandwichApp.com.